Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of Keys to AWS Optimization 2024. I am super excited to be back, to be streaming with some amazing guests today, talking about Microsoft optimization. No, not the services beginning with A. There's someone joked to me today. This is all about Microsoft services on AWS. So we will be diving into that topic in just a minute. Bit of housekeeping, as I said, first episode back. And with that, we have a brand new announcement that we are now on Spotify. Yes, yes, yes. Everyone, we've listened to everyone saying, or also miss saying, this is a podcast. This is now a podcast. So you can listen and watch to this videos on Spotify. But don't forget, you can always tune in on YouTube if you're watching us live, or if you're on YouTube, you can watch us live on twitch.tv/AWS and come and ask questions, answer questions, and join in the chat. One other small thing I just wanted to note, if you're in the UK, there is a reInvent recap tour going on right now. For more information, go to my LinkedIn. But just a caveat, on the 8th and 9th of February, I will be in London doing a cost talk. So keep your eyes out on social media for that. But enough of me chatting. I've got two amazing guests for me today. Hey guys, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yep, happy to be here.
And we already commented they've got lovely matching swag on. I realized the first episode back, I'm not wearing Amazon branding. I've gone for some Marvel attire today. But yeah, so Bill, why don't you give us a bit of an intro and give us a bit of your 1-minute origin story to introduce yourself to the folks?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name's Bill Pfeiffer. I'm a Microsoft Specialist SA. I've been with AWS for going on 5 years now, and I've worked in the infrastructure space and Microsoft technologies for 17 years or so, doing both systems engineering and technical leadership roles.
Nice. And Chase?
Yeah, thanks. So Chase Lindeman, I'm also a specialist solutions architect here at AWS that focuses on Microsoft workloads. I've been at AWS for about 4.5 years now, and I've been working with Microsoft technologies probably about the same as Bill, about 17, 18 years, maybe a little longer, back to the Windows XP days, right? So long time.
Oh, wow. I mean, and I'm excited to get into this because we haven't done a kind of episode probably like this a little bit, but we're going to be showcasing some amazing resources that you can all access and talking about what these guys have built. But I want to throw back to Bill. We started working together years ago on the Query library, right? That's where we first met.
Absolutely.
If you haven't seen the Query library, go and check that out. Super great resource full of these amazing queries that a bunch of us wrote that I reference still to this day, and my entire team references still. It's just a great place to get started with your cost and use report. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment, put things in the chat. We always want to know what you're thinking. And also, if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to email us at costoptimization@amazon.com for all your thoughts, feelings, and other questions you have. But Bill, let's get into what we're talking about today, which is Mako. Is that what is that? Do you say Mako?
Mako.
Mako.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Mako is short for Microsoft on AWS Cost Optimization, and this is an initiative that the specialist organization put together. And I founded it. Me and Chase have been working on this, leading and supporting this effort. And Chase, as a co-founder, has been amazing, being able to drive enablement with our customers and internal teams. And really, what Mako is a collection of recommendations that are really us distilling all of the specialist solutions architects' best recommendations for Microsoft workloads and what they share with customers on a regular basis. And what we saw in 2022 and previous years, but in 2022, a strong interest in cost optimization in these categories. And one thing that we saw was we didn't really have any documentation. It was all based on, direct interaction. Everybody had a little bit of a different message when they were delivering these recommendations. And what we thought was the best way for us to be able to get this out to our customers is put it in a public repository. So that's where Mako came about. We have about 44 recommendations that span 7 different categories. So Uh,
44.
yep.
Jeez, that is. I didn't realize you had that many. God, that's amazing. So, and they cover. Is it all? So maybe Chase can answer this. Is it covering all services that are Microsoft based on AWS?
So whenever we talk about like Microsoft on AWS, we're talking about the Microsoft stack.
Okay.
So things like Windows Server, SQL Server, Active Directory, how Windows applications like .NET would work with like a Windows file repository. So there's multiple areas. There's storage, there's infrastructure, there's application type. It really just depends on all the different layers of that Microsoft stack.
Ah, okay, okay. You can tell I am not as in tune with the Microsoft. And I have to point out, Bill, your cat is creeping along behind you.
There's nothing like it. It's like a Halloween episode now. Now I got the
It
cat sneaking up
literally,
behind me.
it's very funny because the kind of blur is only picking it up in some places, so it's very funny. Love that. Okay, so one of the big things is how do people get started with all these Microsoft services? And I think that you're gonna show us a bit around this place where they have all this data, right? So
Yep.
let's share your screen.
Perfect. So if you're looking to be able to get to this information, we have it in this workshop tool that we use to drive like regular immersion days and hands-on workshops with customers. And if you're just looking for Microsoft on AWS cost optimization, AWS, you should be able to find it within a Google search. We are going to be putting this on the main Microsoft landing page within the AWS public website. So there'll be a bunch of different references to this. We're also part of the uh, cloud, or excuse me, cost financial framework too. So there's like a lot of cross collaboration between the cloud financial management teams. But
Mhm.
one of the things to get started that we wanted to do is like, all right, this is a topic that's kind of this niche workload in the cost optimization space. And for customers, right, you might have practitioners or different personas that aren't familiar with Microsoft workloads, but they want to tap into the potential here. Say it's a cost optimization analyst. They don't have a
Mhm.
Microsoft background. What we've put together in the document is a customer journey. And what we've tried to do is take a lot of different hands-on customer engagements that we've had and show what other customers have done, kind of the step-by-step that they've gone through to be able to implement a lot of these recommendations. So we've actually, I think we have 24, and then they all link out to the appropriate recommendation or the program that we're talking about. So it tries to take this and make it simpler for customers to be able to consume this information.
Mhm. So it's specifically, but it's for technical kind of people who are not really sure. But so I guess if you're watching this and you're thinking, like, you want to learn more about the how to optimize these kind of services, but you're not sure where to start, this gives you this overall view, right?
Exactly. Yep. And that's like, all right, we have it first as, budgets and standard, cloud financial management baseline, but
Mhm.
then we dive right into, you might not know what an optimization and licensing assessment is and how to be able to get started on that, where we'll be able to help provide migration guidance, right sizing guidance, and licensing guidance for new and existing workloads. And then from there, we dive into more complicated but impactful topics like bring your own license, for example, and dedicated hosts, which we consider to be very niche to the Microsoft workload space.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I guess one kind of follow-up question. So if you're thinking from a kind of FinOps perspective of somebody who is maybe not sure if they are using a lot of Microsoft, this might not be in this section at all, but who aren't sure if they are using a lot of these things, is there a way for them to like figure it out, or is there any places they can go apart from maybe Cost Explorer? Like, yeah, what would you suggest if someone's like, I don't know if I'm using this?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we do have a recommendation in here that's like using Cost Explorer and kind of more of those baseline setups again, but we do go into things like the billing information field. So that's one way to
Right.
be able to see. And that is basically like going in and looking at your usage type and seeing what run instances version it is. So if you were to look for like, billing information fields, for example, you could see in here that you have SQL Server, AMIs, Windows BYOL, Windows with SQL Server. So that's one way to be able to identify that you're using. Yes.
So I didn't realize. So the run instance and then the code at the end, is that in Cost Explorer?
It is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So if you go back in here, I think we actually have it called out too in one of these images where you could go through and see where it is. Yeah. So if you're in here, API operation. So that's one way to be able to see, are you running Microsoft or Windows operating systems in SQL Server? We have other services in here too, like directory services. And we also integrate with, EBS. These are foundational components as well. So
guys, comment in the chat if you knew that and I'm an idiot. Like, I didn't know that. So I'm glad that I've now learned the fact. And I'll get it after this episode, Bill, but we'll pop the link for that wiki page you just had on there as well. Okay, cool. All right, sorry, I really derailed the start of where you were going. So take us back. Where were you headed to?
No doubt. Well, this is really just about the consumption model here. So I think one of the things that we might want to do is take a look at maybe implementing some of the recommendations, right? I think that would probably be useful for folks to see. So I'll pass the mic over to Chase, and we'll talk about maybe some SQL Server is super impactful as far as cost optimization goes with some of these adjustments that you can make to existing or new environments. So I'll let Chase kind of dive into these.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So the reason why we end up talking about SQL Server a lot with customers is because it's such a large portion of their total cost of ownership. If you were building an application that was all on open source technologies, you don't really have to worry about the licensing portions that are associated with it. But Microsoft workloads, they typically have their AWS bill for the infrastructure that they're running for their application. And then they might also have another bill that goes to Microsoft every year or every few years, depending on the type of licensing that they want to buy for their application. SQL Server is very expensive. And so whenever we're looking for things or talking to customers of trying to find the largest impact, SQL Server is usually top of mind for them. And specifically, we always talk about, right sizing your workloads, but you also need to right size the licensing for your applications using the correct licensing structures, the licensing tiers. Things like not using enterprise level software if you aren't using the enterprise level features. So we have a lot of different things associated with SQL Server because it's so big. As far as licensing is concerned and the other recommendations, one of the things that we were really trying to show adequately was that we wanted to explain what it was, so an overview of everything. We wanted to talk about the effectiveness, right? How would you go through doing this? What kind of expected result would you be able to get? And really kind of outline things like you can see on Bill's screen here. Whenever we talk about architectural differences, there are many different ways to run SQL Server. And there's different costs that are associated with them. There's different licensing that's associated with them. So we wanted to compare them each one by one, so that whenever a customer is looking into running SQL Server, if they're reviewing their existing workloads, they can get an understanding of what options are available. Now, as you can see down here on Bill's screen here, the other portion is that we wanted to show like real costs. What does this actually mean? It's one thing to say it can, reduce it by 74% if you did it, but we wanted to show if this was a test workload and you were lining them up side by side, what would this actually look like if you were to use something like database migration service versus something else like that's native to SQL Server. And so we tried to do our best to outline those costs, even link to the simple calculator, right, to give customers an understanding of what a test environment would look like if they were to try to go run this on their own, or if they wanted to compare it to what they're running today.
Yeah. just the amount of detail is great in here, and I think I'm going to really implore the rest of my team to kind of dive into this, because I think that sometimes with a lot of these services, and maybe Finance people feel the same, that when someone's like, we're using SQL Server and that's just it, and we have to use it like this, so they kind of maybe don't go past that kind of glass wall of just being like, this is SQL, this is what we're doing, we have a look at it. But just like you said, a very simple thing of, why are you paying for a license if you're not using it? It's just a simple question to ask, but that may be too technical or too involved for some practitioners. So this is a great way for them to upskill and also give them the information to ask the questions. I think that's a lot of things with this kind of information is perfect for it. It's about questions. We actually have a question. What optimization do you think most people should look at? So is there one that you're always like, this is the tab that you always, when you're kind of show, apart from maybe the SQL one, that you're always like, this is a good one, take a look at this?
Yeah, I would think maybe Compute Optimizer, using AWS Compute Optimizer. So if you are looking to start into cost optimization and what's actually running in your environment today, Compute Optimizer would be one of the simplest ways that you
Mhm.
can get automated recommendations about what you're actually using on a day-to-day basis. And one of the things that Bill is showing here is that we had a larger customer like this that you started using Compute Optimizer, went through the recommendations, went through the changes, and you can actually see the dip in their bill as they went through, they made the changes, and then they decided, okay, well, we now have more budget available, and now they can, run these other applications.
That's great. These kind of success stories. It's funny that you're highlighting this picture as well, because sometimes we'll often stop at like the middle of that. So where there's like, what is that, July 2022? That's where the picture ends for a lot of people. And they're like, oh, we saved all this money. And then you're like, no, reinvestment, which is great, which is something we want to focus on. Awesome. There's a link to Compute Optimizer. Okay. Again,
I want to jump
continue
in
on.
too, because
Yeah.
this ties into Compute Optimizer, is that SQL Server's extremely impactful when you're going through these different recommendations, making these architectural decisions as well as licensing decisions. But what we've also started to do was, in Compute Optimizer, there is now inferred workloads, which will detect that Microsoft SQL Server is running. And there are also checks to be able to tell you to look at, it'll actually integrate with your existing database, providing, there's some configuration where you go into detail about that, where you have to set up credentials. But what happens is that Compute Optimizer will actually look at the instances and be able to detect, are you using enterprise features? And if not, make recommendations to downgrade to standard edition. And then we
Oh,
give
wow.
links to be able to help with that. So
Did you say that was in Compute Optimizer now? Or is
it
that?
is. Yep.
Oh, Rick is
Yep.
killing it as always in the team. Oh, that's the new license one. Oh, yes.
New
You
license one.
can, yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Again, for someone who knows nothing about licenses, the only thing only story I have about licenses, very small anecdote, was when I was at KPMG and I started doing optimization. I was looking for our bills, I love to do, and I found this. I think it was like SAP HANA edition of like a license, and I was like, who's using this? And it took like months to figure out, and it turned out no one was using it, but we've been paying for it for like 10 years, not 10 years, maybe like 5 years. And it wasn't like the most expensive thing, but it was like every month we've been paying for this license, and no one had been using it, and no one knew where it was in, like the root account. It was a whole thing. I'm sorry, showing shade at KPMG, sorry. But yeah, it was always really funny to find these things. So keep an eye on your licenses is definitely a tip from there. Okay,
Absolutely.
so yeah, SQL optimization. Anything else in the SQL world that you're kind of like, this is a good thing for us to like? Because I'm learning a lot, so keep going.
Obviously, the addition types, the additions and the differences between them, because it's so large. I mentioned before 74% or so. That's the difference between Enterprise Edition and Standard Edition, is that Standard Edition is 74% cheaper than Enterprise. So if you're not using those features, it's a massive, massive reduction. What we're looking at here is like the cost of something that only has something like 4 CPUs,
Mhm.
and the licensing is based on the number of CPUs you use. But many customers aren't running just a 4 CPU SQL Server. They're bumped up into 16, 32, 48 cores, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars of licensing costs.
Yeah.
So if they're looking for the big fish, right? The one that would look really great in their cost reductions, going through the addition types and making sure that they're using the correct additions is a really big one. One of the other ones that we point out is there's an addition called Developer Edition, which is completely free from Microsoft. And many customers don't know it exists. And so they're paying thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for licenses which are completely unnecessary.
Wow. And can I ask another question about moving between licenses? So, say I'm a developer, I've started, I'm using the new developer one that I know about that's free, and then I start to need more from it. So I might want to move on to the next level. When it comes to the actual changing of that license, is that something that's easy to do, that kind of, or even like the other way around? So if you figure out that you're paying the most expensive license and you want to drop it down all the way to developer, will that affect your database at all, or is it just a pricing construct?
Most of the time, it's just a pricing construct. We have so licensing is a pretty complex topic, but I'll try to explain it in the most brief way that I can. That there's multiple ways to run the licensing. They can go get them directly from Microsoft.
Mhm.
We have license included instances. So something like you just spin up Windows Server, you're paying for the license as part of the EC2 instance. And so depending on the licensing model that customers are using might change how they work with those licensing costs. So if they were going to Microsoft, they might be paying a yearly, what's called like a software assurance payment to them to keep their licenses up to date. It's something that they may not have to renew. And once again, those software assurance payments are about 25 to 30% of the normal cost of the full license. And they have to pay
Mhm.
them year over year over year over year. So if they can find a way to reduce those software assurance payments, it's a big win for them. If they're using license included instances, you can just change your instance type and be able to realize that pretty quickly. There
Cool.
are some areas, especially with SQL Server, if you're running enterprise version, if you're going to move to standard version, you will have to migrate. So there is a little bit of pain, but usually the costs benefits far outweigh the administrative effort that it would take to go through that.
Right, right. I just feel like I'm unlocking a whole new question to ask my customers when they need to optimize. It's like, do you actually need the full level of SQL license, which is great. Oh, is this oh yeah, share the link as well, Bill, so we can pop that in. But is this about changing between the different enterprise
Yeah,
editions?
it's nuanced, right? Depending on, do you have a clustering deployed, some sort of HA? There's more, there's more to the process, right? And Microsoft has it pretty well documented. But we do have, if you're running single instances, say you had developer instances that were deployed and they were using Enterprise Edition, you could utilize the systems manager automation document to be able to automate basically the creation of a new SQL server or copying over the database and so on. So worth taking a peek at for sure.
Yeah, for sure. We've got a question as well from Cloud Asher. Are there any recommendations for disabling hyperthreading per core licensing for cost optimization? Any feedback?
For
Yes.
disable it, yes. So it's called optimized CPU. I believe it's in one of I think it's in the licensing recommendation there. I believe, yeah, one of them, it goes specifically into using something like what's called optimized CPU. So whenever you first spin up a EC2 instance, you have the ability to change the amount of vCPUs that it's using, meaning that you're disabling hyperthreading. And whenever you do that, you're changing the amount of licensing that's associated with that from the Microsoft standpoint. So it's definitely something that we talk to customers about if there isn't an existing EC2 instance type which fits into that. So say if you needed to move from let's say 8 CPUs down to 4 CPUs, keep your RAM the same, you may just be moving from an M class EC2 instance to a R class EC2 instance. But if you needed more than that, you might have to use optimized CPU.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for answering. Okay, we've got just under 5 minutes left. So a quick question: what are you looking to do next with Mako? Oh God, how do you call it again? I'm just like Mako,
Mako.
not Mako. Yeah, what are you looking to do next with Mako?
You want?
Yeah, so we're trying to get an understanding of cost optimization from a customer standpoint. This year, we're working with a lot of the customers who are implementing things like Compute Optimizer to see if we're giving them the right recommendations so that we can kind of tweak things. So understand that whenever Mako is multiple things. It is the guide, but it's also how we handle cost optimization discussions within the Microsoft organization. So we have internal enablement as far as like getting other specialists up to date on all the different cost optimization ways that you can go about doing this with Microsoft workloads. And then we want to reach more customers, right? That's always the biggest thing is we have our normal customer interaction, but they're one-on-one. And so we would love to go present this at different summits or anything like that, where we can talk about cost optimization, the benefits that customers would be able to see from this. And so, yeah, 2024, we're definitely looking at trying to get this more into customers' hands. We recently published much of this guide into AWS prescriptive guidance. So, like Bill mentioned, we are going to be kind of linking it off of the main page. Uh, it's kind of slow to move from the existing guide over to AWS prescriptive guidance, so there might be a little bit of difference between them. I would say to go to the Workshop Studio one if you want the full list of recommendations. But yeah, there's a lot of work into cost optimization in this space for the foreseeable future.
Great. No, this is awesome, guys. Okay, in the last like 1 minute, any favorite customer story you want to share for someone that you've worked with on this?
Yeah, sure. So I think Bill will highlight one, and this was a customer that we worked with last year. They were already running on AWS. They had brought over Windows Server licensing, meaning that they needed to use dedicated hosts. That's a really big portion in the Microsoft world about it if you want to bring over Windows Server. And they wanted us to review how their existing workload was working today. We did a review, looked at all the different EC2 instance types, looked at different dedicated hosts, and what we found with them doing their testing, they were able to move from the C4 dedicated hosts over to the C6i dedicated hosts, doing a 2-generation jump. So they jumped straight from C4, didn't touch C5 onto the new stuff, right? Was that they saw a 30% performance increase, right? So there's good price performance changes as you move up from one generation to the next. The other portion to that is that the number of hosts needed to run the entire workload because of all these performance increases was reduced pretty largely. And so down there at the bottom, you can kind of see the summary was that we were able to save them over $92,000 per month just in compute costs. So just the cost of the dedicated hosts.
Wow.
By moving over and reducing the number of dedicated hosts and by reducing the number of vCPUs needed to run the same workload, they were able to repurpose 1,600 Windows Server licenses, which is a large chunk of money by itself.
Yeah.
And we always look at things like sustainability. Sustainability is a big thing at Amazon, and so one of the other things that we really like to point out is the overlap between cost optimization and sustainability, where a lot of the cost optimization changes you make have an impact uh, on sustainability, and so they were able to actually reduce their physical footprint by 80% just making these changes.
Awesome. All right, we can hear the chime call in the background. So that
Yeah.
is it for today. Richard, do you want to throw up your screen? Amazing. So as always, do a summary from Richard if his share screen will load. But while it's loading, thank you so much, Bill and Chase, for coming on and sharing this. I feel like I've learned a lot from this. So this is awesome. And there we go. So summary episode, simplified by linking task to recommendations. So it's a great resource. Are you sure you need that license? Bringing in the catchphrase, are you sure you need that for the license? And Compute Optimizer is your friend. Yes, as always, check out Compute Optimizer. Thank you so much for joining. Next week, we're going to be talking about Instant Scheduler and diving into that. So thanks again to all my amazing guests, and we will see you all next week. Bye.